October 28, 1991 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Sid injury, Steamboat and WWE part ways. Flair's belt. By Observer staff. The Jan 4 show at the Tokyo Egg Dome got off to an amazing first day. Tickets went on sale on October 10 for the second combined New Japan/World Championship Wrestling Dome show, and when the day was over, there were 11,644 tickets sold for a gate of $1,394,240. This is hardly a first-day sales record as far as number of tickets are concerned. In recent years, both the old Universal Wrestling Federation based in Japan and the World Wrestling Federation, for shows in Great Britain, have sold more tickets to certain events the first day seats went on sale, although tickets prices were much lower so the gate wasn't nearly the same level. However, this is believed to be the second biggest first-day sales as far as dollars are concerned in pro wrestling history. The all-time record first day as far as both tickets sold and dollars was set in 1989 by the old UWF for a show at the Tokyo Egg Dome where they sold approximately 40,000 tickets the first day for in excess of $2 million, although there are differences in comparing that first day with this one. The UWF show didn't even put tickets on sale for the card until 3 weeks before the event for the specific reason to set an unbreakable first-day ticket record. Tickets for the New Japan/WCW Dome show were put on sale 13 weeks in advance of the card. No lineup has been announced for the card, although a tentative lineup we received some time back indicated the top matches would be Tatsumi Fujinami vs. Riki Choshu for the IWGP World title, Lex Luger vs. Masachono for the WCW World title, Rick and Scott Steiner vs. Keiji Muto and Sting for the IWGP Tag Team title, Antonio Inoki in an exhibition match against a wrestling legend, Shinya Hashimoto vs. Willie Williams, Karate, in a martial arts match, and El Gigante vs. Big Van Vader, and there is no indication any of those matches will be changing. The WWF and SWS Super World Sports have their own show set for December 12 at the Tokyo Dome. Tickets have been on sale for several weeks, although the advance isn't anywhere near the level of the New Japan/WCW show. None of the matches for this show have been announced officially as of yet, but it is believed that the top 3 matches will be Hulk Hogan vs. Genichiro Tenryu for the WWF title, Legion of Doom vs. Natural Disasters for the WWF Tag Team title, Ric Flair vs. Yoshiaki Yatsu, and the finals of the tournament for the WWF Junior Heavyweight title, probably Naoki Sano vs. Paul Diamond. There is nothing substantive to report on the condition of Sid Justice. Justice suffered a tendon injury in his left bicep on October 7 in Orlando, and has been out of action ever since. The latest word we had was that he was going to get the final word on whether or not he would need surgery on October 21, and if he did, he'd have surgery later this week. Justice wasn't at the WWF television tapings on October 21 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and at the taping, they announced his injury and that he was out of the Survivor Series. Depending upon who one talks to, and also depending upon whether he will undergo surgery, his downtime could be as short as 6 weeks or as long as several months. They did an angle at television where Randy Savage did a stretcher job for Jake Roberts and did an interview begging to be reinstated, but as of television that airs a week before Thanksgiving, Savage won't have been reinstated. This is strange since presumably he'll be working house shows nightly in a headline role against Jake Roberts, and also inevitably be the captain of the babyface team in the top elimination tag team match at Survivors. Unconfirmed word as of Monday night is that Justice was expected to be out of action for about 4 months, which means almost until, but not including WrestleMania, which changes a whole lot of plans. On Monday, the WWF and Ricky Steamboat terminated their relationship in a quit/fired scenario. Steamboat, wrestling as the Dragon, actually gave notice to the WWF that he would be finishing up on December 16 because he was unhappy that his promised big push hadn't materialized, and didn't appear to be going to do so at any time in the near future. He was also unhappy about money. Steamboat signed a 2-year contract with Titan in January and went on the road full-time in April, but had only earned $52,000, or about the level WCW paid wrestlers like Van Hammer, Johnny B. Bad and Chip the Firebreaker. At Monday's television taping, the agents asked him to do television squash jobs for both IRS and The Undertaker. Reports are that Steamboat was willing to do jobs to anyone at arenas until leaving, but he wasn't going to work as a television jobber after the reputation he's built up. When he refused, Vince McMahon fired him on the spot to the extent that he wouldn't even issue him a plane ticket home. It does make perfect sense that McMahon would want to give Undertaker a big win at the tapings as he's scheduled for a pay-per-view match with Hulk Hogan. With IRS, that seems more punitive. However, if the job was ordered to push Undertaker and not to bury Steamboat, then Steamboat would have been replaced by any number of a dozen guys like Von Erich, Duggan, Bossman, Bulldog, Michaels, Jannetty, etc. in doing a TV squash last night for Undertaker. When that didn't happen, it became obvious the squash was scheduled to bury Steamboat and not primarily to push Undertaker. It should come as no surprise that a wrestler with Steamboat's talent and pride in his ability had been unhappy about his costuming and gimmick from the start, particularly since he'd been languishing in the opening matches, after being a headliner most of his career. Big Van Vader and Tatsumi Fujinami captured the annual New Japan Tag Team Tournament on October 17 in Fukuoka, winning the championship match from Riki Choshu and Masa Saito before a packed house of 6,480 fans. Fujinami pinned Saito to win the tournament. Choshu and Saito pretty well clinched a spot in the finals on October 15 in Kobe when they defeated Scott Norton and Shinya Hashimoto, with the upset finish coming in 10-18 when Norton did the job for the Saito suplex, giving the former Olympic Games wrestlers 10 points. To keep the intrigue going until the last night, this left Vader and Fujinami, Hiroshi Hazi and Keiji Muto, Bam Bam Bigelow and Masa Chono and Norton and Hashimoto all with 6 points as of the October 15 show. And wouldn't you know it, the October 16 card in Nagasaki had Bigelow and Chono versus Norton and Hashimoto and Vader and Fujinami versus Hazi and Muto. So the two winners of those matches, which turned out to be Bigelow and Chono and Vader and Fujinami, met on the undercard on October 17 with the winning team meeting Choshu and Saito. Vader pinned Chono in 16:04 with a lariat to earn the shot at the championship match. Probably the most famous tag team tournament, and longest standing, dating back to the mid-1970s, is the annual All Japan World's Strongest Tag League Tournament, which starts November 16 at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo and finishes up on December 6 at Budokan Hall in Tokyo. All Japan announced the lineup this past week, which will consist of Giant Baba and Andre the Giant, Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao, Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada, Rusher Kimura, and Mighty Inoue, Stan Hansen and Danny Spivey, Terry Gordy and Steve Williams, the defending champions, the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith, the Can-Am Express, Dan Crawford and Doug Furness, Dory Funk and Al Perez, Johnny Ace and Sonny Beach, Joel Deaton and Billy Black and Abdullah the Butcher and Kimala too. Surprisingly, Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, both of whom are frequent main eventers for the group, won't be in the tournament. It'll be interesting because last year, the worst team in the tournament, Baba and Andre, didn't do a job but were eliminated when Baba broke his leg, and a few days later, Andre was injured as well. One would think the eventual winners would be either Misawa and Kawada, Gordy and Williams, or Hansen and Spivey. World Championship Wrestling released most of its Clash of the Champions lineup for November 19 in Savannah, Georgia. Of the matches that are official: PN News vs. Diamond Stud, Big Josh vs. Thomas Rich in a lumberjack match, Arachnum and Brad Armstrong, this time back as a face, versus Richard Morton, Brian Pillman vs. Johnny B. Bad, Van Hammer vs. Cactus Jack, Steve Austin vs. Bobby Eaton, Oz vs. Dustin Rhodes and the Enforcers vs. Barry Windham and Ron Simmons. There will either be one or two other matches that will be made official during this coming week, depending upon whether or not Rick Rude is signed for the Halloween Havoc show as the Halloween Phantom. A Japanese promotion, which is set to start its next tour in early November, the Universal Lucha Libre Group, is now in grave jeopardy because its biggest drawing card and best wrestler, Yoshihiro Asai, jumped from the UWA in Mexico to the MLL, and the MLL signed a talent exchange contract with the SWS in Japan. Asai, who is one of the most talented wrestlers in the world today, is scheduled to make an appearance at the SWS shows next week in Japan. It'll be interesting to see how well Universal can draw without Asai, as it has a strong lineup of wrestlers from Mexico on its next tour, but it can't be stressed enough how important the charismatic Asai is to the group's popularity. Asai's debut with MLL, which is said to be paying him nearly 9 times as much money as he earned with UWA according to one source. With his new deal, Asai will become the highest paid Japanese wrestler ever to work foreign soil, as his contract is better than the contract Keiji Muto received while working as the Great Muta for WCW, as the Masked Ultimate Dragon has been put temporarily on hold for political reasons. The Ultimate Dragon was scheduled to debut on Friday night at Arena Mexico in a 6-man tag team match, teaming with El Hijo del Santo and Octagon against Masakre and MS1 and Satanico. However, the rival UWA still had one trick left up its sleeve, as Asai's working visa was with UWA and not MLL, and word got out they were going to give him immigration problems if he worked the show. He made a big entrance and did a few spots with the heels, but wasn't allowed to work the match. The same situation took place on Saturday night at Arena Pista Revolucion in Mexico City. Ironically, the Friday night card at Arena Mexico also didn't air on television in the United States because of the strike, as union leader Manny Guzman refused to allow cameras to tape the card as originally scheduled. So for now, Asai's debut with MLL is on hold until that group can get him a working visa, while the television situation remains up in the air pending further negotiations. They did do an updated wrestling news segment on the television show which showed Octagon in a park looking for his new friend, and the Ultimate Dragon came into the park looking for Octagon, and they met and hugged, etc. So that was the introductory skit. Those things are still funny to me after all these years, still seeing guys wearing a suit and tie, but also wearing their mask, no matter how commonplace it is in Mexico. Things are pretty slow as far as major news this week, but expect a lot of happenings next week. WCW has its Halloween Havoc pay-per-view show on Sunday. For those in the area, we'll be having get-togethers for Havoc, Survivor Series, and the San Antonio pay-per-view show here, and don't forget to vote in our readers' poll in regards to that card. WWF has television tapings on Monday and Tuesday night, plus the first 3 Ric Flair vs. Hulk Hogan matches take place Friday night in Oakland, Saturday night in Los Angeles, and Sunday night in Tempe, Arizona. A court date has been scheduled for November 7th in WCW's quest to get back the belt from Flair. Flair's attorney, Dennis Guthrie, told the Miami Herald they'd be willing to sell the belt back to WCW for $50,200 last week. As mentioned last week, WCW failed to get a temporary restraining order against Flair calling himself world champion on WWF television shows and at the arenas. The judge in Charlotte threw the case out of court. No real breakthroughs in the follow-up of the Paul E. Dangerously suspension. The official WCW word talked of a hearing, although there is no indication any such hearing is forthcoming. Any investigating of the charges against Dangerously that caused the suspension, since there is no substantiation to them, and it certainly does seem he was a scapegoat because others wanted to get out of an agreed-upon program, should seemingly result in his reinstatement, and while there are definitely those in power in the company who would want him back, more as a manager than a color commentator, it still seems at this point unlikely to happen. Interestingly, WCW has dropped all color commentators from its television shows. The new lineup will consist of Jim Ross doing the WCW Power Hour and Saturday Night Show on TBS, Tony Schiavone gets back on cable doing the main event on Sunday and continues hosting worldwide in syndication. Ross will be put at the helm of the WCW Pro Show in syndication. Eric Bischoff will do the main event in syndication and the various international shows. As for the other co-hosts, Missy Hyatt will continue doing various segments like the Fan Scan, etc. Magnum TA will remain in the front office handling booking. Dallas Page will become a wrestler, you read that right, and Dangerously should disappear into thin air. Dangerously has reportedly already served Jim Herd with papers concerning his being dropped, and there has been talk of him holding a press conference within the next week or two in New York regarding the situation. The Inside Edition piece that was scheduled to air this past Friday, which included interviews with Dr. George Zaorian and with Bruno Sammartino regarding steroids in pro wrestling, mysteriously didn't run as plugged-in TV guide. Reporters from the show were in contact with Sammartino and others as late as early this past week confirming the Friday air date, and the segment wasn't replaced by a timely piece. At press time, we've received no reason for the pulling of the piece nor word on whether the piece will air at any time in the future. The Ron Reagan Show, which nobody watches, had an interesting one-hour show on the subject that aired Monday night. It was actually a rerun from a show that originally aired in September. It included clips of wrestlers Hulk Hogan, Rick Rude and superstar Billy Graham among others, and featured a surprisingly informed and rational discussion of the subject since most mass media coverage on the subject has been sensationalistic-oriented. Among the guests were ESPN talk show host Roy Firestone, Dan Duchesne, author of the Underground Steroid Handbook, and 2 former competitive bodybuilders along with Lyle Alzado's personal physician Dr. Robert Huizinga, who came off the best with well-thought-out comments. There was no mention of pro wrestling during the show, with much of the discussion about use of steroids in sports, or in life in general, with an emphasis on the NFL. Considering this show was actually taped in August, that says more about the respect, or lack thereof, most give pro wrestling than anything else. Huizinga, who is an NFL physician, admitted that while the NFL's tests are as sophisticated as technology has advanced to, those with enough money and enough sophistication can beat any form of testing with drugs like growth hormone masking agents or EPO, a European steroid which Duchesne said he advises his athletes to use if they're in a sport that has drug testing because it's undetectable, and according to Huizinga has been linked to 41 recent heart attack deaths in Europe of world-class cyclists. The latter was a fact seemingly lost on everyone in the audience and those who don't understand the subject. Then they just say to test the guys and kick out the ones who fail to clean up whatever league you're referring to, forgetting that the biggest abusers generally have the most knowledge or connections to knowledge regarding the subject, and they'll be able to beat the tests the easiest. The Sept 8 issue of Pro Football Weekly quoted Dr. James Wright, an authority on the subject, and saying studies have shown that someone can inject 300 milligrams of straight testosterone per week in their testosterone/epiandrosterone ratio, which is what steroid tests measure, will never exceed 4.2 to 1. A 6-to-1 ratio is needed to show a positive in steroid tests. It is also possible to inject larger doses of testosterone along with injections of a p-endosterone so the ratio stays below allowable limits, but this goes well beyond the sophistication level of most athletes. Straight testosterone is said to be most prevalently used by athletes competing in drug-free powerlifting competitions. This is the first issue of the current set of 4 issues. If you've got A1 on your current address label, it means that your subscription to the Observer will expire in 3 more weeks. Renewal rates remain $6 for 4 issues, $12 for 8, $24 for 16, $36 for 24, $48 for 32 up through $60 for 40 issues within the United States and Canada. Rates for outside the US and Canada, for weekly airmail delivery are $9 for each set of 4 issues through $90 for 40 issues. Yearbooks are still available for $12 in the US and Canada and $18 overseas. All subscription renewals, yearbook orders, match results, news items, clippings, letters to the editor or any other correspondence relating to this publication should be sent to the Wrestling Observer Newsletter, P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. Fax messages to the Observer can be sent to 408-378-6562 afternoon Eastern Time daily, 9 a.m. Pacific. EMLL. The latest on the strike is that this past Wednesday representatives of the Wrestlers and Referees Union, led by union head Manny Guzman, the EMLL, promoter Paco Alonso, the RTC, similar to the FCC in the United States, the SNL, similar to the Department of Labor, and Televisa all met with no significant changes in anyone's position. Talks between the sides have come to a standstill, but right now the wrestlers aren't boycotting any shows. However, the threat to pull out of the Arena Mexico show on Friday night was enough that television cameras weren't allowed in, which is too bad, because I was told it was a great show because of a women's tag team match with Kyoko Inoue and Toshio Yamada of All Japan Women against Esther and Cynthia Moreno, which ended with the Japanese team winning the simultaneous superplex and double arm superplex on the Moreno sisters, although the Fuji network in Japan did tape the match. Guzman is now filing a request that the president of Mexico, Carlos Salinas de Gortari, mediate the talks and issue an injunction banning the televising of Lucha Libre in Mexico City so as to protect the live gates. It is said that Guzman would settle the strike if Televisa would agree to move the television from Sunday, right now it is on at noon, to a late-night weeknight slot which doesn't go head-to-head with live shows. As it turns out, since televising the big shows began on Sept 8, the attendance at all the arenas in Mexico City has gone significantly down, which is what Guzman predicted would happen. However, in no way are the wrestlers united in regards to this subject, or on their position regarding the union. The Wrestlers and Referees Union was originally formed more than 30 years ago to protect the wrestlers and referees against promoters who stiff them on payoffs. The union is thought by the wrestlers to be an extremely lucrative business of its own, because the union receives 3% of all wrestlers' payoffs for every show during the year. Plus, in every arena that regularly runs cards, the promoter has to run 1 show per year in which all the revenue goes to the union fund. In addition, wrestlers pay a yearly union dues above all that. The union's main function now is to take care of wrestlers while they are injured and pay them what they would be earning if they were able to make their shots, although some complain that it doesn't result that way. According to one source, Pero Aguayo, when he was out of action for a while, was paid significantly less than he would earn while wrestling. Some EMLL wrestlers believe the strike was called because of what is believed to be jealousy from the more established UWA wrestlers, who have the strongest voices in the union. As has been reported here many times, the UWA was the dominant group in Mexico until recently, when MLL has surpassed them in attendance and revenue. Most of the long-established superstars work mainly for UWA, and the MLL wrestlers in many cases believe the UWA superstars are jealous that the upstarts are making more money and gaining for fame and publicity than they are. They point to the fact that when the UWA wanted to begin televising its El Toreo shows on Imavision, the union didn't make any kind of a fuss. The main event of the opening night at Arena Mexico this past Friday, which drew about 8,800 fans, had Cien Carson Mascara Año 2000 and Sangre Chicana vs. Canadian Vampire Casanova, and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Pero Aguayo. This group ran a show in Tijuana, border down near San Diego, on Friday night headlined by Los Brazos vs. Lismark and Atlantis and Leo de Lismark. The TV show from this weekend just showed matches from earlier this year with an updated news segment portion talking about the debut of Ultimate Dragon and the tag team matches being booked around the area with the Japanese girls against the Moreno sisters. October 13th at Arena Coliseo in Mexico City saw Black Magic, Norman Smiley, and Kato Kung Lee and Aguila Solitaria beat Fuerza Guerrera and Blue Panther and Kung Fu when the commission stopped the match because Guerrera was fighting with fans in the stands. The newspapers reported a suspension of Guerrera for fighting with fans is expected. Also Conan and Casanova and Jalisco Jr. beat Cien Caras and Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000. The acrobatic tag team of Oro and Plata are the sons of Calavera II and nephews of Calavera I, who were a legendary tag team from Guadalajara. UWA. October 13th at El Torreo in Naucalpan saw Canek and Fishman beat Mil Mascaras, and Villano 3 via DQ and Mascaras unmasked Canek in the third fall after the two had traded the first two falls. To hype sagging live attendance, they seem to be headed to a Mascaras vs Canek feud and have dropped Canek's feud with the Foreigners, Miguelito Perez, and Gigante Warrior. Butch Masters and Buffalo Allen, Bad News Alan Coage, beat Enrique Vera and El Texano and Silver King in 2 out of 3 falls when Vera, who was bloodied up by Bad News, was pinned after a low blow in the third fall. The Canadian Tiger and El Signo and Negro Navarro won 2 straight falls from Los Villanos in a non-title match, which sets up Los Villanos defending the trio's title against those 3 in the near future. El Gran Hamada and El Psicodelico and Fantasma beat Black Power, John Bonello and Scorpio Jr. and Shu El Guerrero and Lobo Rubio and El Hijo del Diablo beat 3 of the 4 Ninja Turtles. UWA on October 18th at Arena Netzahualcoyot had Mascaras and Villano 3 and Vera vs Killer and Allen and Fishman on top. The October 20th El Torreo show was headlined by a masked vs masked match with the Canadian Tiger vs Villano 4. El Engendro, who has been out of action since mid-September with a broken clavicle, was scheduled to return on that card. Ultramancito and Pandita Chiquito, the midgets who work in Japan for FMW, have signed with this group. Ultramancito is said to be great while Pandita Midget is said to be awful. Japanese Wrestling Journal, however, reported that Ultramancito was Mascara Sagrada, the best midget worker in the world. Cutie Suzuki won the UWA Women's Junior title on October 10th in Tokyo from Scorpion. UWA promoter Carlos Maines is supposed to have a meeting with Joe Pedicino within the next 2 weeks about working out talent exchanges. All Japan. The tour continued without a lot of major news leading to the big show on October 24th, headlined by Jumbo Tsuruta vs Toshiaki Kawada for the Triple Crown. Mitsuharu Misawa is out of action after suffering a broken nose on October 14th in Osaka courtesy of a stiff forearm smash from Jumbo Tsuruta. Misawa worked the big show the next night in Korakuen Hall, but was rarely in the ring and hasn't been back since. October 14th in Osaka drew a sellout 2,300 as Misawa and Kawada and Kena Kobashi beat Tsuruta and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa in 27:30 when Kobashi pinned Ogawa with a moonsault press. Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace beat the British Bulldogs. Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith, Danny Spivey pinned Billy Black. Dan Crawford and Doug Furnace beat Firecat. Brady Boone and Richard Slinger, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi beat Haruka Eigen and Motoshi Okuma and Masa Fuchi. Joel Deaton pinned Robert Gibson and Joe and Dean Malenko beat Mighty Inoue and Osamu Teranishi. October 15th at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo, taped for television that aired this past weekend, drew a sellout 2,100 as Tsuruta and Tao and Fuchi beat Misawa and Kawada and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi in 23:54 when Tsuruta pinned Kikuchi. Hansen and Spivey beat Crawford and Furnace when Spivey pinned Crawford with a DDT in a non-title match. Ace and Kobashi beat Deaton and Black. Bulldogs beat Slinger and Firecat. Malenkos beat Ogawa and Teranishi. Inoue pinned Gibson and Baba and Kimura beat Okuma and Eigen. October 16th in Honja drew a full house of 2,100 as Hansen and Spivey and Slinger beat Kawada and Kikuchi and Kobashi in 16:22 when Spivey pinned Kikuchi with the DDT. Tsuruta and Tao beat Black and Deaton. Bulldogs beat Ace and Cat. Crawford and Furnace beat Malenkos and Gibson pinned Inoue. October 19th in Nagami drew 3,100 as Hansen and Spivey and Black beat Kawada and Kobashi and Kikuchi in 10:10 when Hansen lariated Kikuchi. Tsuruta and Tao and Ogawa beat Ace and Deaton and Cat. Crawford and Furnace beat Bulldogs. In a big upset, Okuma and Eigen and Fuchi beat Baba and Kimura and Momota when Okuma pinned Momota in 22:43 and Malenkos beat Gibson and Slinger. Dates were announced for Korakuen Hall on Jan 2 and Jan 3. TV on October 13th did a 4.7 video research and 2.2 Nielsen rating, which is okay. New Japan. Final tournament standings were 1. Vader and Fujinami 2. Choshu and Masasaito 3. Bigelow and Chono 4. Hazi and Muto and Norden and Hashimoto tied 6. Duke and Singh and Samoans tied. The October 13th show in Chiba drew a sellout 7,000 fans with the inflated ticket prices, $154 ringside, and a gate of approximately $538,000 in a card taped for a home video as Riki Choshu and Masasaito beat Bam Bam Bigelow and Masachono. Tony Halme beat Big Van Vader in a boxer versus wrestler match via a 6th round knockout. Tatsumi Fujinami pinned Super Strong Machine in 12:44 with a backslide. Keiji Muto pinned Tim Horner in 9:53 with a moonsault, Shinya Hashimoto pinned Hiroshi Hazi in 11:50 with a DDT, Scott Norton pinned Tiger Jeet Singh in 6:58 with a power slam, rare pin job by Singh, who is a legend in Japan, in a match where Norton juiced like you wouldn't believe. The Samoans, Samu and Kokina, beat Osamu Kido and Kengo Kimura, Kim Duke and Masanobu Kurisu beat Masashi Aoyagi and Black Cat and Shiro Koshinaka and Kunyaki Kobayashi and Akira Nagami beat Hiro Saito and Tatsutoshi Goto and Norio Onaga. October 15th in Kobe drew a sellout 3,650 as Choshu and Saito beat Norton and Hashimoto, Bigelow and Chono beat Samoans, Vader and Fujinami and Pegasus Kid, Chris Benoit, beat Duke and Singh and Kurisu, Hazi and Muto beat Koshinaka and Kobayashi and Nagami pinned Hiro Saito. October 16th in Nagasaki drew a sellout 3,030 as Vader and Fujinami beat Hazi and Muto when Vader pinned Hazi with a lariat, Bigelow and Chono beat Norton and Hashimoto when Bigelow pinned Norton, Choshu and Masa Saito and Kobayashi beat Pegasus Kid and Samoans when Kobayashi pinned Kid, Kido and Koshinaka and Kimura beat Duke and Singh and Kurisu. Hiro Saito and Goto and Machine beat Cat and Nagami and Aoyagi and Onaga pinned Scorpio. October 17th in Fukuoka for the tag tournament finals drew a sellout 6,480 and approximately $289,000 as Vader and Fujinami beat Saito and Choshu, Hazi and Muto and Nagami beat Kid and Samoans, Hall May knocked out Aoyagi in boxer versus karate martial arts match, Koshinaka and Hashimoto beat Duke and Singh, Vader and Fujinami beat Bigelow and Chono to earn the spot in the championship match, Oz and Jushin Liger beat Hiro Saito and Scott Norton when Oz made Saito submit in 6:11 and Onaga and Goto and Machine beat Kantaro Hoshino and Kobayashi and Kido. The tour ended with a big show on October 18th in Hiroshima drew 5,850 fans and approximately $240,000 as Muto and Chono and Hashimoto beat Choshu and Fujinami and Hazi in 15:30 when Muto pinned Hazi with a moonsault. Vader beat Hall May with a fourth-round knockout after a lariat in a martial arts match. Aoyagi beat Randy Thornton, former football player being trained in Minnesota by Brad Rheingans, in a martial arts match with a third-round knockout. Akira and Oz beat Bigelow and Onaga. Liger pinned Pegasus Kid. Masa Saito and Norton and Kimura beat Duke and Singh and Kurisu. Samoans beat Cat and Koshinaka and Hiro Saito and Goto and Machine beat Hoshino and Kido and Cat. There were some major problems regarding Vader, since the promotion wanted him to get knocked out in both matches with Hall May. In the first match, the match nearly got out of control between the two behemoths and it turned into a minor shoot and nearly a post-match fistfight after Vader did the job and Fujinami had to act as the peacemaker. Vader threatened to walk out on the tour and quit the promotion if he had to do the second job, and after everyone thought things out, they understood his point that after doing a clean pin job for Norton and 2 knockouts to Hall May, they'd be doing too much damage to their leading foreign drawing card, so they agreed to let him split his matches with Hall May. TV was preempted the past 2 weeks and next week as well because TV Asahi will be airing golf tournaments in the Saturday afternoon time slot. SWS. The shows at the end of the month should pick up a lot of interest because of Asai appearing on this tour, although his name hasn't been inserted into the lineup because the lineups were made before the Asai deal was finalized. Genichiro Tenryu and Kabuki were in the US this week for business reasons. Tenryu was at the WWF card at the Spectrum in Philadelphia while Kabuki made a trip to Mexico to officially get the signature of Asai. October 28th in Nagasaki as Tenryu vs Haku, Takashi Ishikawa and Ashura Hara vs Yoshiaki Yatsu and Shinichi Nakano, Warlord and Barbarian vs George and Shunji Takano, Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond, Kato in WWF vs Samson Fuyuki and Tatsumi Kitahara, Naoki Sano vs Akira Katayama and Masao Orihara vs Bestia Salvaje. October 29th in Fukuoka has Tenryu vs Yatsu, Hara vs Warlord, George Takano vs Barbarian, Ishikawa and Fuyuki vs Haku and Nakano, Tanaka and Diamond vs Sano and Orihara and Kitahara vs Katayama. October 30th in Kumamoto is Tenryu vs George Takano, Ishikawa vs Haku, Hara and Kabuki vs Yatsu and Nakano, Fuyuki vs Barbarian, Shunji Takano and Kenichi Oya vs Warlord and Diamond, Sano vs Tanaka and Orihara vs Salvaje. Masakatsu Funaki, Yoshiaki Fujiwara and Minoru Suzuki from PWF will appear on the December 12 Tokyo Dome show. They tried this in March, but UWF-style wrestling on a card with WWF-style wrestling just doesn't mix well, for obvious reasons. Other Japan notes. PWF ran a show on October 16 in Tokyo's Korakuen Hall before a sellout 2,250 fans headlined by Minoru Suzuki beating Bart Vale with a full Nelson submission in 13:45. Yoshiaki Fujiwara beat McDuff Roche with an Achilles tendon submission in 16:19. Masakatsu Funaki beat Takahashi with an Achilles tendon submission in 6:24. Wayne Shamrock beat Wellington Wilkins Jr. with an arm lock, and a rookie named Tamateg went to a 30-0 draw with Jerry Flynn. FMW on October 14th at Hakata Star Lanes drew 3,529, which is more than any of the UWF-style groups drew in the same building, as Atsushi Onita and Samba Asako beat Mark Starr and the Gladiator, Mike Awesome, in a street fight. Tarzan Goto beat Horace Boulder, and Miwa Sato won the WWA World Women's title, beating Combat Toyota in 10:23 of a major upset. FMW announced its tag tournament from November 20th to December 9th, but none of the teams have been announced as of yet. But it'll be the first appearance in Japan in nearly 10 years of the Sheik, who should draw with this group since it's mainly a blood promotion, although I'm not so sure I'd want to see a guy of Sheik's age take the kind of chair shots they give each other. Of course, Gypsy Joe, who is almost as old, loves to take those shots. This group pays its foreign wrestlers generally $700 to $1,000 per week, and you know they're making an exception for Sheik. October 15th in Nagasaki drew 1,351. Crowd was weak because New Japan ran a show in the same city the next night, as Boulder and Gladiator beat Onita and Kim Chu Hwan in a street fight. Asako and Goto and Hana beat Starr and Lance Storm, and Chris Jericho and Amigo Ultra beat Pandita. October 17th in Sasebo drew 2,328 as Onita and Handa and Kim beat Starr and Boulder and Gladiator. Jericho and Storm beat Goto and Izaki. Ricky Fuji beat Ultra. Onita, after this tour, is coming to the US to try and book new talent. He's looking to book wrestlers from Oregon, since most of that crew has never been to Japan before. JWP drew 2,365 on October 17th in Tawada as Harley Saito and Devil Masami and Mami Kitamura beat Dynamite Kaisei, and Eagle Sawai and Tomoko Hoshino, formerly the Scorpion, who lost her mask to Cutie Suzuki on October 10th in Tokyo. Reggie Bennett and Terry Power beat Miki Handa and Atsuki Yamazaki. Suzuki and Plum Marco beat Mayumi Ozaki and Rumi Osawa. All Japan Women on October 17th in Takamatsu drew 2,100 as Asia Kong and Bison Kimura and Kwaro Ito beat Suzuka Minami and Yumiko Hata, and Kazue Saito and Minami Toyota pinned Debbie Malenko. October 14th JWP in Takeho drew 1,218 as Kaisei and Hoshino beat Saito and Kitamura, and Bennett and Power and Ozaki beat Yamazaki and two others. October 19th in Kitami drew 1,200 as Power and Bennett beat Hoshino and Kaisei, and Saito and Masami and Handa beat Ozaki and Osawa and Sawai. October 18th in Bison drew 850 as Hata beat Mima Shimoda and Bull Nakano, and Akira Hokuto and Bat Yoshinaga beat Minami and Malenko and Toyota. October 16th in Saku drew 300 as Sawai and Kaisei beat Handa and Masami. Saito beat Hoshino and Bennett, and Power beat Mariko and Kitamura. Next TV taping is October 26th with Nakano and Hokuto vs Kong and Kimura on top. Oregon. The October 19th show at the Portland Sports Arena drew another crowd of about 800. They opened with Bart Sawyer vs Al Madrill in a match that Sawyer said would be his last match for a while because he's undergoing knee surgery. The match ended with no decision because Madrill tied Sawyer up in the ropes and tried to cut his hair when Mike Winner did a run-in attacking Madrill. Next in the series of matches without ending saw Demolition Crush keep the Northwest title going to a double count-out with Billy Jack Haynes in a match where they basically worked off the full Nelson from each man. Next came the former Jimmy Jack Funk, now back wrestling as Jesse Barr, versus the former Big Juicer, now JW Storm. It was a pretty stiff match, including Storm going to throat drop Barr on the top rope, but picked him up and tossed him a little too far, and he wound up going over the top rope. Finish saw Sandy Barr get bumped, and Storm loaded his forearm pad and pinned Jesse for the win. After the match, Storm clotheslined Sandy Barr as well. Next came the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, who are back as Northwest Tag Team Champions because of Don Harris' win over the Grappler last week in a match where the winner would get possession of both belts, going to a no contest with Steve Dahl and Mike Miller when Miller was thrown out of the ring and they tied Dahl's neck up in the ropes and were beating on him until Grappler made the save. Then in a babyface match of the week, yet another non-decision as John Rambo went to a time limit draw with Mike Winner, and the finale saw Grappler, working as a face, use the loaded boot to pin Moon Dog Moretti. This coming Saturday has Crush vs Haynes for the title in a rematch with Falls Counting Anywhere in the building, and No DQ Barr vs Storm in a street fight, and the Harris brothers split up in singles matches against Dahl and Grappler, which will be the first step in what appears to be a several-week program for the tag team title since Dahl and Grappler challenged for it, and the Harris brothers, they weren't good enough, but they'd split up and wrestle singles against them. One of the columnists in the Oregonian ran a small item this past week on Art Barr, and that he's trying to get reinstated as a wrestler. In reality, it's the pressure from this columnist that has kept him from being licensed to wrestle, stemming from a rape charge and guilty plea to sexual assault. Word we get is the commission will decide whether or not to reinstate Barr in about a week. USWA. October 14th in Memphis saw driver Tony Falk and Bull Payne and Samantha beat the New Kids, Brian Christopher Lawler and Tony Williams, and Brandywine Tony Anthony Drew Doug Masters. Dog of War beat Brian Kelly. The Texas Outlaws, Jeff Sword and Doug Vines, beat Bill Dundee and Danny Davis. Jeff Jarrett and Robert Fuller went to a no contest with Eric Embry and Tom Pritchard, and Jerry Lawler beat Billy Travis via DQ when Embry and Pritchard interfered. October 15th in Louisville saw Davis draw with Tony. Travis beat Dundee, Embry and Pritchard beat Dutch Mantell and Anthony. Jarrett and Fuller beat Outlaws. Jarrett and Fuller DDQ Embry and Pritchard, and Lawler pinned Travis. They must have set a new record on Saturday, having just 2 matches on a 90-minute television show. In one match, Embry and Pritchard wrestled Freezer Thompson and Dave Doughty. Once again, Thompson was on offense the entire time, but his partner was pinned. This match had a lot of heat in the studio, and the gimmick is starting to get Thompson over. After the match, Embry once again offered Thompson a spot on his side, and Thompson once again turned him down. The other TV match saw Jarrett and Fuller beat Masters and Scorpion in 2 straight falls, with Scorpion losing both times and Masters saying next week he'll find himself a new partner against Jarrett and Fuller. They aired video clips of various attacks by Embry and Pritchard on Eddie Marlin to set up a 6-man tag, as Marlin, who was a rookie wrestler in 1949, the same year Jerry Lawler and Ric Flair were both born, and is I believe 61 years old, and Jeff Jarrett's grandfather, said he was too old to wrestle Embry by himself, but wanted to get his hands on him in a 6-man tag. Jimmy Valiant is headed back in 2 weeks to work a program with Dog of War, Buster Fowler. October 21st in Memphis had Koko War vs. The Rookie, Christopher vs. Masters, Dog of War vs. Anthony Mantell, and Dundee vs. Outlaws, with the faces putting up their hair and the heels putting up their masks. And since Sword and Vines are supposed to be gone because they lost a loser leaves town match, if they lose they'll probably be gone, Jarrett and Fuller at Marlin vs. Embry and Pritchard and driver Tony, and the main event is Lawler vs. Travis in a rematch. Global. October 19th at the Dallas Sportatorium drew 630 fans for 3 hours of television tapings. For Major League Wrestling, air date November 2nd in syndication and November 5th on ESPN. Eddie Gilbert pinned Rick Guerin. Sam Houston, who looked a little pudgy, beat Barry Horowitz. Black Bart pinned The Outlaw. Sweet Daddy Falcone and John Tatum beat Ben Jordan and Terry Daniels, and Soul Taker pinned Al Perez when Gilbert hit Perez with his TV title belt. For Major League Wrestling, air date November 9th in syndication and November 12th on ESPN. The Maulers, Jack Victory and Rip Morgan, beat Jordan and Daniels. Terry Garvin and Chaz beat the Davis brothers. Tug Taylor, who is Chaz's real-life father, and they are beginning an angle regarding that shortly, came to ringside for a few seconds and then walked off. The Renegade Warriors beat Horowitz and Ed Robinson. The Rattlesnake, Jeff Rates, pinned Falcone, and Perez pinned Stephen Dane. The final hour was GWF main event, November 9th in syndication and November 20th ESPN, with Gilbert beating Bill Irwin via DQ when Gilbert pulled out a bag of powder, threw some in the air and in his own face and tossed it to Irwin, who caught it, and the refs saw Irwin with it, so Gilbert kept the TV title. Soul Taker pinned Tony George. Gary Young beat Rod Price via DQ when Skander Akbar interfered, and Renegade Warriors beat Maulers when Mark pinned Victory. After the match, the Maulers beat up on the Warriors and 2 referees. Well, the big angle to determine who is the boss took place at the start of the first hour of taping. Gary Young was doing an interview when Joe Pedicino came out with a cassette tape and player. He said the interview would show who the boss was. Commissioner Max Andrews came out and congratulated Pedicino for doing such a good job and asked for the tape so he could conduct a thorough investigation on the matter. Pedicino refused to give up the tape and pushed the play button, and you heard an argument between Scotty Anthony and Andrews, with Anthony repeatedly referring to Andrews as the boss. Andrews then left the scene. Later on the card, somebody named Marco Villa, said to be the GWF Director of Internal Affairs at the home office in Barcelona, Spain, came out and fired Andrews as commissioner and made himself interim commissioner until a new commissioner is named. They have a few more angles to play stemming from this scenario, which will wind up with Bill Eadie as the new commissioner. The big problem mentioned last week of the TV going head-to-head with the second hour of WCW on TBS on Saturday was changed, with CH27 moving the show to 9 p.m. on Saturday night. The October 20th card in Marietta was cancelled because it went head-to-head with the second game of the World Series, and with the popularity of the Braves in Atlanta, there was no hope to draw a crowd on that night. The show is being rescheduled for November 18th. The current ESPN schedule is to run new shows each week from Monday through Wednesday. The Tuesday and Wednesday shows will air what was on syndication the previous Saturday, while Monday is a show just for ESPN, and old shows on Thursday and Friday. They've got a house show scheduled for October 26th in Gadsden, Alabama with Handsome Stranger vs. Scotty Anthony, Susan Sexton vs. Bambi, Maulers vs. Sheik and Rick Donovan and Lightning Kid vs. Chaz. They will be adding 2 new faces to the cartel headed by Andrews to go along with Anthony and Mochan Singh, now wrestling in Europe legit, while they've got a babyface trio called the Wild Bunch of Black Bart, Bill Irwin, and Rattlesnake. October 25th at the Sportatorium has Patriot vs. Falcone for the North American title, Lightning Kid vs. Ben Jordan for the light heavyweight title, Chris Walker and Steve Simpson vs. Tatum and Price for the GWF Tag Team title, Bart and Irwin and Rattlesnake vs. Falcone, and Tatum and Price and Davis Brothers vs. Garvin and Chaz. Coco Ware is headed in here and there. To correct an earlier report, Buddy Rogers is vehemently denying that he's going to work for Herb Abrams. Word we've got is that Abrams will be replaced on Sports Channel by a group called the American Wrestling Federation, with Sunny Beach as the booker, which will be doing its first tapings on December 14th in Asbury Park, New Jersey and December 15th at Long Island University using Paul Orndorff, Stan Hansen, Dan Spivey, Junkyard Dog, Bob Backlund and Dutch Mantell among others. Speaking of Abrams, he's been going around offering $100,000 to anyone who can beat Steve Williams. Anyway, former wrestler David Schultz has been trying to get word out that he'd accept the challenge provided that it was a shoot. And for a match that wouldn't rival that one for brutality, former newsletter editors J.D. McKay takes on BT Express, Brian Trammell, for Ringside Ride Promotions on November 16th in Charleston, Mississippi. It looks more and more like the resurrection of the LPWA, with new tapings will take place on November 30th at the Jackson, Tennessee Coliseum. The old Florida Wrestling office is reopening with the first show on November 9th at the Tampa Sportatorium. Among the names mentioned as working for the group are Pat Tanaka, Al Perez, Dan Spivey, and Dick Slater. Alex Portu, who most recently wrestled in Puerto Rico, beat Tiger Conway Jr. on October 19th in Tomball, Texas to win the Texas All-Pro title. October 20th in Coima, Puerto Rico saw Randy Rhodes beat Skip Young, Sasha beat Vanessa Prince, Galan Mendoza drew Super Medico No. 3, Ray Gonzalez beat Hurricane Castillo Jr. of the Heartbreakers, Wendell Cooley and Frankie Lancaster beat Invader No. 1, Jose Gonzalez, and Giant Warrior, Butch Masters, and Miguelito Perez beat Dusty Wolf. October 19th in Bayamon saw Warrior beat Rhodes, Gonzalez beat El Profe, Carlitos Colon beat Jack Hammer, Castillo beat TNT to win the WCW TV title. Castillo drew Perez over 30-00, Medico No. 3 and Young beat Mendoza and Wolf, and Invader No. 1 and El Bronco beat Heartbreakers via DQ. Castillo also won the Puerto Rican title in a tournament on October 12th in Bayamon, beating Hector Guerrero in the finals. Kevin Von Erich is promoting a card on October 26th at Lake Dallas Elementary School, with him defending his world-class title against the Sultan and Chris Adams vs. King Parsons. Ottawa CWA runs its final tournament of the year from November 14th to December 21st in Bremen, Germany. On the final night they've got Tatsumi Fujinami vs. Big Van Vader for the IWGP title and Rambo Luke Poyer vs. Ken Patera for the CWA title, and Greg Valentine is coming in as well to face the winner of the tournament. Dick the Bruiser got himself an endorsement with Flambeau Products of Middlefield, Ohio, which make toolboxes, storage cabinets, etc. Independent Championship Wrestling on November 1st in Lima, Ohio, headlined by Mike Kelly and Al Snow vs. Sam Cody and Roger Ruffin. There is now weekly pro wrestling in Charleston, South Carolina at the Flea Market Depot with such names as Burrhead Jones, Denny Brown, Junkyard Dog, Ivan Koloff, Pez Watley and others. Georgia All-Star Wrestling will no longer be syndicated, but will be replaced by Pro Wrestling This Week on CH69 in Atlanta on November 2nd. November 23rd at Bishop Kenrick High School in Norristown, Pennsylvania is headlined by local grad Tom Brandy vs. Honky Tonk Man. United Wrestling Organization on October 7th in Greenville, South Carolina drew 444 for a show with Ivan Koloff, Susan Green, Susan Sexton, and the top matches saw Wahoo McDaniel beat Buddy Landell in a 2 stars, Ron Garvin DDQ Nikita Koloff in a 2 stars, and a battle royal saw Nikita throw out Wahoo to win. The sports marketing group based in Dallas, which does occasional surveys to determine the most popular sports in America, did its latest, listing pro wrestling as number 30 out of the 114 sports named. Several months back they released their original survey, which had pro wrestling listed as the most hated sport in the United States out of about 105 sports in that survey, and also number 41 in popularity. A 1982 survey listed pro wrestling number 5 in most hated but number 8 in most popular, which I guess speaks volumes as to how much the public accepts and likes pro wrestling so much more because of Hulk Hogan. One can argue that this survey appears to be obviously flawed like crazy, being that roller derby number 58, which for all real purposes folded in 1973, although there have been many short-lived comebacks in the past 18 years, is rated ahead of beach volleyball 61, which does good ratings on cable and held its own on the networks this past summer, and in men's and women's tennis 68 and 71 network and mass media staples. This survey is done with the main reason for SMG to advise clients where to spend their advertising dollars, but somehow I don't think any pro wrestlers are going to be getting the number of endorsements that tennis players get, or even beach volleyball players for that matter. Our sympathies to go the family of superstar Billy Graham, whose mother at this writing is in intensive care after suffering a heart attack, and to WWF promoter Jack Tunney, whose wife passed away this past week. WWF. Two main angles at the television taping October 21st in Fort Wayne, Indiana before approximately 6,000 fans in an 8,000-seat building. The main angle saw Jake Roberts win a squash match and start insulting Randy Savage. They did commentary for Jake's match live. Savage hits the ring, but the ref stops him and warns him that if he gets in the ring, he'll lose his announcing job. Savage stops, but is then jumped by Roberts, who ties him up in the ropes and keeps sticking the cobra in his face. The cobra bit Savage in the arm as part of the angle, for 30 seconds intervals before Roddy Piper ran in for the save. All the agents and Elizabeth came out and Savage did a stretcher job, and ended up falling off the stretcher, while Roberts was in the ring laughing. This got a lot of reaction live and upset a lot of kids in the audience. The other main angles saw Hulk Hogan do an interview in the funeral parlor when Ric Flair came out and they were yelling back and forth face to face. Flair said to Hogan, "What you gonna do when Ric Flair runs wild on you?" And at that point, Undertaker came out of a casket and hit Hogan with the urn. Piper and Savage then hit the ring and each hit Undertaker with a chair, and he didn't sell the chair shots. A lot of the fans knew something was up in that one. Right before the segment started, they had 6 people to carry the casket onto the stage. Later in the show, Gene Okerlund interviewed Hogan, who was quoting from Psalm 23 and comparing himself to Jesus Christ and saying he was immortal, with a T, not immoral. The biggest surprise because of the anti-Pavlovian reaction came when Okerlund brought out Jim Duggan for an interview and Duggan brought out Sergeant Slaughter with him. The two did the Pledge of Allegiance together and the crowd booed this like they used to stand up and boo when Nikolai Volkov would do the Soviet anthem. The fans even booed Duggan heavily just for associating with Slaughter, so they've still got some work cut out for them in turning the Sarge. Chris Chavez had another tryout in a dark match beating Skinner. Reno Riggins was given a win in a dark match, but came back later and did a job in a television match against Repo Man, Barry Darsow, with his own new music, but he got no crowd reaction. Slick has been fired, so Harvey Whippleman is now managing Warlord, who has a new ring outfit, along with Big Bully Bizich, although Bizich did clean jobs to Duggan and to Bret Hart, in an IC title match which ended by submission with the sharpshooter. There were more competitive matches than at a usual taping because these shows will air in November, which is sweeps month. Among them saw Legion of Doom beat Nasty Boys via DQ for using the helmet. Good match. Ending looked poor. Virgil pinned Hercules to keep the $1 million belt. Flair beat Jim Neidhart with the figure 4 in 303 and wouldn't let go after, and as Neidhart was walking to the back after losing, the Beverly Brothers, who had the next squash, met him in the aisle and beat him up as well. The Rockers wrestled Barry Horowitz and another jobber twice, second time being a redo of the first match. The impression was that Shawn Michaels is starting a heel turn on Jannetty. IRS beat Greg Valentine via DQ when IRS used the briefcase after a ref bump and Bossman does the save, but the ref sees Bossman interfering. Virgil rolled up DiBiase. Gene Okerlund led the crowd in a reinstate chant. Tito Santana worked as El Matador, Kerry Von Erich worked simply as the Tornado rather than Texas Tornado, and Flair pinned Piper in 8:45 in the main event with his feet on the ropes in a 2.5 stars match, which was easily the best match on the show. It was Von Erich's first match back after missing the weekend. I was officially told he missed the weekend because he attended the funeral of a friend, although he reportedly had his stomach pumped a week earlier and was hospitalized. They were programming a feud with the Dragon versus Ted DiBiase for After Survivors. Virgil was to then work with Skinner, although that's out the window. That program was booked after Dragon had given notice, so it was just to give DiBiase a few wins while Steamboat was on his way out rather than a long-term feud. WWF taped 3-hour live television specials for England at Royal Albert Hall and also for Spain and Barcelona while on the tour. Every show sold out except for Paris, where the building was about 1/3 full. As you can see, if they are starting a Michaels turn, the Rockers are staying. If Michaels is turning, before he turns, he asked to do one singles match with Flair, and they'll be taping it in Texas in early December for Coliseum Video. Bret Hart also specifically asked to do one singles match with Flair, which will also be taped for Coliseum Video, which takes place in November. The last time a wrestler specifically asked to have a singles match with someone because of respect for their ability in this manner was when Shane Douglas asked for a match with Mr. Perfect, which never took place because Douglas left the promotion before the match took place. Suburban Commando was dropped on Friday in the vast majority of theaters it ran in, and by the time you read this, its run should be over and can be labeled a box office flop. Hollywood sources say Disney has lost all interest in Hogan as a box office attraction, and the failure of Commando at the gate is a serious blow to Hogan's future aspirations. Primetime Wrestling on October 14 did a 2.5 rating, while All American on October 13 did a 1.9. For PT, the number is up from the past few weeks, while AA was the second lowest rating in the history of the show, which dates back to 1983. October 19 at the Spectrum in Philadelphia drew 9,032 and $123,284 as the Berserker pinned Valentine, Neidhart pinned Hercules, Beverly Brothers beat Bushwhackers, Undertaker pinned Duggan. Undertaker was cheered by about 85% of the crowd. IRS pinned Bossman after hitting him with the briefcase. Flair pinned Piper with his feet on the ropes. 3-star match. Piper was cheered by 80% of the crowd, but Piper seemed to tire fast in this short match, and Legion of Doom beat Natural Disasters via DQ. They return November 30 with Hogan vs. Flair, and tickets are being raised $1 across the board. In most cities, they'll be doing the $1 price increases for Hogan-Flair matches, but they won't be rolling the price back afterwards. Genichiro Tenryu was at the Spectrum show and introduced with Legion of Doom and announced as coming to the WWF, but got little reaction. October 18 in Kalamazoo drew 2,700 as the Mountie pinned Brooklyn Brawler, as a face in 7-12 dud. Neidhart pinned Hercules in 10:41 1/4 star, Berserker pinned Valentine in 9:12 dud, Bossman beat IRS via DQ in 8:22 when he used the briefcase 2 1/4 stars, Flair pinned Piper in 8:41 with his feet on the ropes 3 stars, Hart pinned Warlord in 12:15 2 1/4 stars, and Rockers beat Nasty Boys in 15:27 2.5 stars. Terry Funk, on a Long Island radio station, made some strong comments regarding Vince McMahon and Hogan. While he didn't specifically say it, Funk, and a lot of the old school wrestlers are mad at Hogan's admission that pro wrestling is predetermined, and his saying that wrestling is like acting in his talk show swing. He said that when Hogan has been off steroids for a couple of weeks that he looks like W.C. Field's sister, and also said, when asked if he'd ever go back to the WWF, that if the choice came down to going back to the WWF or starving, that he'd gladly starve. On a different subject, regarding a letter from Harry White in The Observer some months ago, Funk said that he thought his brother Dory and Harley Race were the guys who wrestled the most different opponents throughout their career of anyone in the history of wrestling. October 19 at the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland drew 3,750 as British Bulldog beat Visage, Beverly Brothers beat Bushwhackers, Dragon pinned Skinner, Undertaker pinned Duggan, DiBiase beat Virgil via countout, Legion of Doom beat Natural Disasters, and Savage pinned Roberts. October 7 in Sheffield, England saw Santana pin Barbarian, Typhoon beat Duggan via DQ, Power and Glory beat the Rockers, Bossman pinned Mountie, Piper beat Undertaker via DQ, Flair pinned Von Erich, Bulldog pinned Earthquake due to interference from Andre the Giant, and Legion of Doom beat Nasty Boys. October 8 in Birmingham, England saw Duggan pin Typhoon, Bossman beat Mountie via countout, Flair pinned Von Erich, Rockers beat Power and Glory, Undertaker beat Piper via DQ, Santana pinned Barbarian, Legion of Doom beat Nasty Boys, and Bulldog pinned Earthquake. Before Justice's injury, in the matches against Roberts was getting a surprising amount of cheers, 25 to 50% depending upon which city they were in. October 9 in Paris, France drew 7,000 as Santana pinned Barbarian, Bossman pinned Mountie, Undertaker beat Duggan via DQ for using the 2x4, Rockers beat Power and Glory, Bulldog pinned Earthquake, Von Erich pinned Typhoon, Legion of Doom beat Nasty Boys, best match on the show, and Bulldog won a battle royal. The postponing of the Tyson Holyfield fight should prove to be a minor benefit to WWF since it's planning those two PPVs just a few weeks after the original fight that would have set pay-per-view revenue records. Even though boxing and wrestling draw from a different audience largely, this fight had so much mainstream appeal and was so expensive that there probably would have been some effect. In addition, most cable systems were going to concentrate their advertising on the fight, with the wrestling getting buried, so the survivors will get more advertising by the systems. Total Research Corporation did a study of overall image of 53 major U.S. celebrities for advice to clients on what celebrities make good product spokespeople. Hulk Hogan finished 47th out of 53, ahead of only Richard Nixon, Hugh Hefner, Donald Trump, Madonna, Roseanne Barr Arnold, and Jerry Falwell. I guess one can say it's impressive that he was even considered enough of a celebrity to be on the list, but again says something about his image and wrestling's so-called new image in America where he stood overall. The highest rated athlete on the list was Michael Jordan, who finished 7th, while Bob Hope, Bill Cosby and Walter Cronkite were the top 3. The October 16th issue of the newsletter Power Hotline was talking about a new product called an engineered food supplement developed by California Dr. Scott Connolly. Connolly said he's already sold $2,000 worth of the product to Vince McMahon and $6,000 worth to Hulk Hogan. The product, which isn't a steroid but a food supplement which isn't on the market and is only available for field study. WCW. This group received a lot of national publicity from the idea of making a public offer to Minnesota Twins Kent Herbig, who himself is a big wrestling fan, who used to tell everyone Baron von Raschke was his favorite wrestler but in the last week seems to have changed his favor to Ric Flair, to become a wrestler after the season is over. Obviously there is nothing to this, but the publicity stunt has gotten the WCW name along with Jim Herd and Dusty Rhodes' name in a lot of newspapers. Usually this is the type of a thing the WWF would do to get their name more easily recognized, so it's a rare positive publicity step for the group. Television tapings for World Championship Wrestling on October 21st at Center Stage in Atlanta were said to be pretty much dreary. On the show that airs November 2nd has the debut of Arachnoman from Web City, wearing a blue and yellow Spider-Man outfit which won't make DC Comics very happy. Johnny B. Bad won a squash match with Mike Graham joining Jim Ross on commentary. Bad then challenged Graham and left him laying until Brian Pillman made the save. Rip Rogers put over Van Hammer while Oz, with no entrance music or even ring entrance, put Sting over clean. The TV main event saw Michael Hayes and Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham beat Arnold Anderson and Larry Zbyszko and Steve Austin in a 3-stars match with Hayes pinning Austin, so I guess they're building towards a singles program with those two over the TV title. Austin and the Enforcers still had their belts, which tells you something. On the show that aired November 9th, during the Van Hammer squash, Cactus Jack was doing commentary and the fans were chanting "We want Flair." Bad beat Graham via DQ in a 1400 hours dud match when Mike used a chair, and TV main saw Richard Morton and Terrence Taylor and Thomas Rich beat the Patriots and Bobby Eaton when Morton pinned the Chipster. There were hints of an Eaton turn during the match. TV tapings on October 15th in Huntsville, Alabama before 4,500 fans included a 1500 hours super match where Windham beat Anderson in their first singles match since their breakup. Later in the show, Anderson and Zbyszko beat Windham and Ron Simmons when Windham was pinned after Anderson hit him with the title belt. They did an angle with Lex Luger and Rick Steiner where they had an impromptu challenge match and Steiner pinned him with a belly-to-belly and then hit both Harley Race and Mr. Hughes when they tried to interfere with Steiner lines. The angle was said to have gotten over huge. The Night Stalker was talked with about being the Halloween Phantom before it looked like the Phantom would be Rick Rude. Last word we had is that Rude and WCW were finalizing an agreement, but it hadn't been signed yet, but the working figure was for about $6,000 per week. The injury report for Havoc goes as follows. Pillman isn't expected to work until Havoc but is a sure thing, ditto Diamond Stud, although he isn't expected to be at 100%. Scott Steiner will work Havoc, although he'll be limited and won't work house shows until late November. El Gigante returned to action on Monday night. Ron Simmons suffered a wrist tendon injury and his arm is in a cast, but he'll work Havoc but won't be near 100%. He was originally injured on October 13th in Greensboro, but decided to work TV on October 15th in Huntsville and aggravated the injury to where he needed a cast from his hand to his elbow. WCW has taken the visual image of the title belt that Flair has off its Sunday main event show. WCW on October 12th did a solid 2.6 rating, while main event did a 1.8 on October 13th, which is its lowest in a long time, but it got killed by the Thomas hearings, and Power Hour did a 1.7. October 17th in Baltimore drew 1,000, the all-time low in the building, as Tracy Smothers pinned Jimmy Garvin, PN News pinned Axl Rotten, Big Josh pinned Bad, Hammer pinned Cactus Jack in 34 seconds, Steiner pinned Morton, Misty Blue won a 7-woman battle royal, Enforcers beat Todd Champion in a handicap match via DQ when Steiner interfered. Austin drew Rhodes and Sting, and Windham beat Luger and Hughes with Zank as referee. The same crew drew about 820 paid in Philadelphia, which was actually up from the last month's show there, but still the WWF outdrew them 11-1 on the same day with Flair versus Piper. The Chamber of Horrors is just going to be the Thunderdome cage from Halloween Havoc in 1989 with a few minor alterations. The problem is that WCW no longer has Tommy Young or Keiji Muto, so this time when they turn on the juice, if the thing catches fire, they may burn down half of Chattanooga. October 20th in Norfolk drew 1,100 as Patriots beat Freebirds, Morton pinned Smothers, Josh pinned Bad, Hammer beat Jack via DQ, News pinned Rotten, Gigante and Steiner beat Enforcers in a non-title match, Misty Blue and Crystal beat Linda Dallas and Cat LaRue, Austin drew Rhodes, Great, and Sting and Windham beat Luger and Hughes. October 18th in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Drew 800 as champion Pin Garvin, Austin Pin News. Josh Pin Bad, Rhodes Pin Morton. Isty Blue and Black Venus beat Linda Dallas and Kat LaRue. Enforcers beat Young Pistols. Sting Pin Jack. Wyndham and Steiner beat Hughes and Luger with Zank as referee. A correction from last week. Starrcade 91 will be called Battle Bowl rather than Battle Brawl, but the setup with the 10 tag team matches and a Battle Royal will be the same as listed last week. Expect managers, at least for the most part, to be taken off the road in order to save expenses. Freebirds will mainly be working as singles wrestlers in November. The readers' pages. Cindy Paradise of P.O. Box 11306, Chicago, Illinois 60611 has put out a cassette tape of 2 wrestling/rap songs, Wrap Around the Ring and I've Got a Hold on You. The tape, which includes a color autograph cassette cover, is $6 plus 50 cents for shipping. The first song is really great. Ron Kirkman of 20863 Country Club Drive, Harper Woods, Michigan 48225 is selling a collection of mid-1970s audio cassettes of wrestling shows from Calgary, Vancouver, Detroit, the Carolinas, Florida, Alabama, Georgia and WWF. Steve Schoenberger of 604 Huey Street No. 404, McKeesport, Pennsylvania 15132 has 2 front row tickets for WrestleMania in Indianapolis and is entertaining offers for them. Sheldon Goldberg of P.O. Box 2371, Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts 02130 puts out a newsletter called Matt Marketplace, which details people selling various types of wrestling memorabilia for $2.50 per copy. Frank Strom of 81 Sargent Street, Revere, Massachusetts 02151 is looking for Joel Goodhart tapes and can trade All Japan Women tapes in exchange. Pat Hote of 2223 and Hobart Boulevard, Los Angeles, California 90027 has Japanese and Mexican tapes for trade. Jeff Mangles publishes the monthly Turnbuckle Tribune at P.O. Box 52088, Rocky Point, New York 11778 for $12 for 6 issues. Nick Nettles of 130 Center, Camden, Arkansas 71701 is looking for 1982-83 tapes of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Bill Brown of 168 Boston Road, Middletown, Connecticut 06457 is looking to trade tapes with anyone and he's particularly looking for independent tapes. John Mills of 4508 Glenway Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45205 would like to trade photos with fans from around the world. D. Davis of 4392 Old Mulkey Road, Tompkinsville, Kentucky 42167 would like to trade his wrestling tapes for rock and country music videotapes. Ross Burbage of 100 Pine Valley CT, Westminster, Maryland 21157 is looking for videotapes of Joel Goodhart shows and Global Wrestling Federation t-shirts. John Zatter Jr. of 71 St. Mary's PL, Nutley, New Jersey 07110 is looking for videotapes of Madison Square Garden and Philadelphia Spectrum cards from 1980-84, American Wrestling Alliance shows from 1984-86, any Saturday Night Main Events and the Eddie Gilbert vs. Cactus Jack matches from August 3rd in Philadelphia. Jeff Gagliardo of 5954 Hill Rose Drive, San Jose, California 95123 is looking for tapes of Jushin Liger. El Nasopoulos of P.O. Box 424, Springvale, Melbourne, 3171 Australia is looking for any videotapes of the IWA Australian Tour in July. Dan Petronio of 365 Bennett Avenue, Rochester, New York 14609 has more than 400 wrestling magazines for sale or trade and will send a list for a SACE. Richard Blevins of 1046th Avenue NW, Hickory, North Carolina 28601 is willing to pay $25 for the first person with evidence, either a card or a poster, that Bob Backlund defended the WWF title in the Greensboro Coliseum. Mike Kelly of 31742 Leona, Garden City, Michigan 48135 is looking for someone who can get him tapes of All Japan Women. He does every WWF and WCW pay-per-view show plus hundreds of other U.S. tapes to trade for an exchange. Evan Schlesinger of 39 Brampton Lane, Great Neck, New York 11023 is looking for a regular source of SWS tapes and a tape of the August 1st New Japan card at Shimonoseki Beach. Bob Ferretti of P.O. Box 34, Jessup, Pennsylvania 18434 is interested in trading tapes and has a list available for those interested. The Ann Bond of 1104 B Arrowhead Drive, Collinsville, Illinois 62234 is interested in getting a tape of the Superforce episode that Sting was in. Dave Prozik of 2278 Hidden Creek CT, Lyle, Illinois 60532 is looking for columnists for his newsletter Wrestling Update Weekly. New England independent wrestlers looking for work can call 603 888-6514. Goodhart. I went to Joel Goodhart's promotion for the last time on Sept 21. Each match with the local wrestlers took about 15 minutes of non-wrestling to try and set up the feud and about 20 minutes after the match to set up the next show. Add a couple of needless intermissions and you've got a 4 to 5 hour waste of time. Owen Hart is still fantastic. Luna Vachon worked harder than anyone on the card. About 25 minutes into the construction of the steel cage, Joel announced to the paying customers that an independent promotion can't afford to have a pre-constructed cage. "If you don't like it, you can stuff it," he said. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm not the only person who will never pay for one of his boring shows again. Joel will soon wind up like most wrestling promoters. Broke. Dave Katz. Mount Holly, New Jersey. In the past year and a half I've been to 20 tri-state wrestling cards which have featured more than 75 different wrestlers, from those with international reputations to those in their first match. The cards have been at the Philadelphia Civic Center, at prominent sports bars and at high schools. Readers of The Observer know about the supercards, especially the matches with Eddie Gilbert and Cactus Jack. While the other cards aren't as well known to Observer readers, I'm of the opinion that they have been good to excellent. I literally walked around the corner to a local high school to see Abdullah the Butcher, Bam Bam Bigelow, Gilbert and Buddy Landell wrestle. But that wasn't the only good wrestling. Tri-State has a core of about 15 regulars who provide very good and sometimes excellent matches. They don't receive the same attention in the newsletters as the more widely known wrestlers. I've seen very good matches from Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody DC, Drake, Larry Winters, JT Smith and Mr. Sandman. In fact, their matches have been some of the best on the cards. I'd gladly buy a front row ticket to see any cards that consists exclusively of matches with the Tri-State regulars. They provide everything from arm drags to moonsaults to body slams on tables. Tri-State style is generally very physical and fast-paced. Douglas Stalker. Newark, Delaware. I attended the Autumn Armageddon 2 card and must say it was the most enjoyable night I've spent at wrestling in a long time. The show was a hardcore's dream. It's really nice to see a promoter in this country that cares about fans over 12 years old with IQs over 80. I have read letters from people ripping Joel Goodhart, but I say to judge him on the bottom line. I enjoy his cards and he doesn't treat his fans like they are idiots. He sees a segment of the wrestling market whose needs aren't being met and he's satisfying them. Dave Shearer. Marmora, New Jersey. I've never felt so strange after a wrestling card as after Joel Goodhart's Sept 21 show. First, the positives. Owen Hart vs Takayuki Iizuka was a 4.5-star match and the best match I've seen live all year. The heat, work and reaction of the crowd after the match were all incredible. It was also the only match on the card where you could actually see the wrestling. There were other good things about the card but this carried it. Where can I start with the negatives? The Battle Royal was useless, as guys were juicing from ordinary moves. Aside from JT Smith, who has a lot of potential, all Goodhart's guys seemed to learn how to do on this card was Blade. The work rate in Tony Stetson vs Mr. Sandman was pathetic. As for the Black Hearts and Luna, I just wish I could have seen their match as they spent it all out of the ring. About the only time Terry Funk was in the ring was when he put the spinning toe hold on Fallen Angel. Instead of a wild mixed tag team match with Eddie Gilbert and Medusa vs Cactus Jack and Luna, we received a good women's singles match with Medusa vs Luna. Bam Bam Bigelow vs Doug Gilbert never took place. Fans had to wait 45 minutes for a negative-star cage match between Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik. This was unbearable to the point of being near torture. Goodhart claimed during the wait that if this was WCW or the WWF, the cage would come down from the ceiling. That's right, WWF or WCW would display respect for the fans and employ a professional crew to set up the cage. Goodhart really put his foot in his mouth on this night because he continually trashed Jim Herd, Vince McMahon, WCW and the WWF, but his promotion proved to be sixth-rate. I've never felt this way after attending any WCW show and I don't think I'll be going back to Philadelphia for any of Goodhart's events. Ian Goodwin. Brooklyn, New York. After a 14-hour drive, I got to see one of Joel Goodhart's cards and wasn't disappointed. The card featured a little bit of everything. It had the bloody brawling with Terry Funk, Abdullah the Butcher, the Sheik and Kevin Sullivan, but it also had an excellent technical wrestling match with Owen Hart's win over Takayuki Iizuka. I enjoyed every minute of the show and was really impressed with Goodhart's wrestlers. The Black Hearts vs DC Drake and Johnny Hotbody was one of the best matches on the card. One thing is for sure, the card blew away anything WCW has done in the past 2 years. Jeff Neal. Somerset, Kentucky. Dangerously. In the wacky world of pro wrestling, the duo of Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett pulled the plug on an angle that would have made them both a lot of money because, gasp, Eddie Gilbert knew about it. Paul E. Dangerously is then suspended for no reason except that he's Paul E. Dangerously. Sid Justice then gets into a confrontation with a guy half his size, then rushes out to get a weapon that would make anyone back down, the dangerous squeegee. And they call us marks. Jeanette Crump. Fairfield, California. WCW. I must say that I've been very impressed with a lot of readers' comments. In regards to John Karsh's thoughts about WCW, I couldn't agree more with his insight. However, I must admit his list of options that WCW could take gave me a good laugh. Not that they aren't good ideas. It's just that I somehow don't think good ideas and WCW go hand in hand. First of all, who is going to fire the current WCW regime? Jack Petrick? No. That would mean he'd have to fire himself. Ted Turner? I think it's pretty well established he could care less about his wrestling company. Why else would he allow year after year to go by with the same people in charge who have run it into the ground and have no insight into the business? Personally, I don't think enough has been said about Turner's non-involvement into his company. The blame at this point should be placed at the top because it's been long enough. It should be obvious by now that the people running his company don't know the wrestling business. It's also obvious that until Turner gets involved we might as well wish for Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy because the rating of the WWF, or hiring Bill Watts, or any other sign of progress isn't going to happen. I've been a loyal NWA fan for 12 years now and nobody wants to see a turnaround more than I do, but one can only take frustration for so long without saying to tell with it, and I've said it. Rick Barone. Akron, Ohio. Keith Barbaro's idea about putting an ad in the Atlanta Constitution is a good idea. I'd be willing to pitch in a few dollars and I think a lot of other people would too. It's about the only thing that would get Ted Turner's attention. Matthew Wolfley. Dunkirk, New York. The last two WCW shows have been pleasant surprises. The Luger Wyndham Brawl was very well executed and it made the Sep 21 show very exciting. The Sep 28 show was even better. There was a great impromptu Richard Morton vs. Brian Pillman match and the all-out brawl between Abdullah the Butcher and Bobby Eaton was terrific. This was the most heat I've seen on TBS in a while. Tim Whitehead. Johnson City, Tennessee. How can WCW keep putting on pay-per-view shows with 10 or more matches in less than 3 hours and with more than half of them having no purpose? Haven't they learned anything from the past cards that didn't work? They should concentrate on the matches with meaning and not waste valuable time with people like the Creatures or the Halloween Phantom that nobody cares about. Joseph Gianninoto. Mount Vernon, New York. WWF. I'm replying to a letter written by Charles Warburton in the October 7th issue that was a response to my own letter in the Sep 6 issue. Charles seems to be under the delusion that Vince McMahon is not responsible for pro wrestling drawing bigger crowds today than in the past. To put it bluntly, Vince is responsible. He has turned this sport from a dark, smoke-choked environment and turned it into family entertainment and a multi-million-dollar business. Can you tell me that one federation has ever had 300 television affiliates across North America? Did the American Wrestling Alliance ever have 20 million regular viewers? Did the NWA in 1990 alone put on a total of 663 separate live cards in 191 different cities? Did the old WWF ever put on pay-per-view cards that grossed $8 million? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are sadly mistaken. It is Vince McMahon who is responsible for all of this business. You call his production a circus. But what is a circus? Family entertainment. That's what it boils down to. He has made his business into world-renowned family entertainment. If you don't like the WWF, that is your opinion, but the facts remain that Vince McMahon is a financial wizard and deserves full credit for his accomplishments. Paul Desiderio Siley. Upper Montclair, New Jersey. DM, first off, Vince McMahon deserves credit for his business successes, which are many. But unfortunately, some of us were following pro wrestling in the past and know the differences between the facts and the claimed facts that many have accepted as reality. In 1983, the year before Vince McMahon changed the face of pro wrestling, this business in North America drew approximately 13 million fans live. In 1991, that number will be between 3 and 3.5 million. The WWF is much larger and more successful than any American promotion in the recent history of wrestling, but the overall wrestling business hasn't been weaker in the past 20 years. Part of this business constriction and nationally based promotions destroying the regional offices was inevitable. We were writing about that as the future of wrestling in 1983, before Vince McMahon was known in the wrestling business as anything more than Junior, the son of a promoter and a television announcer. Today there are wrestlers able to make far more money than ever before, but there are also much fewer jobs to go around and less places to learn and perfect the craft. While the WWF does have nearly 300 television affiliates, the WWF doesn't have anywhere near 20 million regular viewers. That number is based on an ability to manipulate statistics and count the same viewer every time he watches a different show. WCW Publicity claims 21 million regular viewers using the same statistical manipulations of counting by adding up the total viewership of every television show during the week of a highly rated Clash special. But TV ratings for pro wrestling before 1984 were much higher than they are today. For example, in 1981, Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS cable did a 6.4 average rating, and today if any regular weekly wrestling show on cable does a 3, people in the front office are doing cartwheels all week long. From the late 1970s to as late as 1985, the live wrestling show in Memphis drew better ratings than virtually every program on primetime television, and did 60 to 75 shares, and there were many markets as late as the early 80s which did 40 to 60 shares for the local wrestling program, something completely unheard of today. Did the NWA put on 663 shows in 1990? No, about 400, most of which lost money, so the number signifies nothing when it comes to the strength of the company. One would estimate that this year there were approximately 13,000 live shows put on in Mexico, a country much smaller than the United States. But in 1975, the NWA as a whole, which at the time consisted of around 24 full-time territories in North America, probably put on at least 5,000 live shows in far more than 191 cities. As for pay-per-view, most nobody made money in pay-per-view like Vince McMahon, because it didn't exist in those days. But even throwing in all the pay-per-view orders for 1991 and multiplying them by 4 and adding in the live attendance of 1991, it still wouldn't equal the number of fans who paid to see pro wrestling in 1983, let alone in the mid-70s when even more regional offices were flourishing. While there have been demographic changes, those changes have been overstated as well. When I was growing up in San Jose, we had wrestling 30 times per year at the Civic Auditorium. The last pro wrestling show in San Jose, a city whose metro area has almost doubled during the past 20 years, was a WWF show in the summer of 1990, and probably 200 shows per year within a 3-hour drive, as compared with 22 to 24 in 1991. The Civic was loaded with kids under 12 at every live show. The percentage under 12 was significantly higher at those shows than at the last WWF show I attended at the Oakland Coliseum Arena 6 weeks back, or for that matter, at the last WWF show in San Jose last summer, the reason being kids got in for $1 in those days, not because wrestling was more popular with kids at the time. This was 1971-73 that I'm talking about. I agree that WWF of today is more popular with kids than the wrestling of the early 70s in this part of the country. Part of that was because that wrestling aimed itself at an older audience. But pro wrestling has always had a great deal of popularity with kids. Despite claims to the contrary, kids attending pro wrestling and watching it on television didn't start with either Hulk Hogan or Vince McMahon. What McMahon deserves credit for is his ability to run his competitors down to where they either cease to exist or no longer competitive, his merchandising acumen, the basic ideas of which were copied from what already had been very successful in Japan and in the music and sports business 10 years earlier, and some of which was his own branching out from those original concepts. This is to his credit. If others running wrestling and other businesses learned from successes in marketing the same product in foreign countries or from successes in other industries that can be transferred to their own, they'd also be able to come up with innovative new concepts. His ability to manipulate the media, his ability to produce an effective television vehicle for his time, largely due to FCC deregulation by Ronald Reagan, which allows a show to be nothing more than a 60-minute merchandise commercial, something which would have been illegal years ago, and his ability to take advantage of new technology. What he can't be given credit for is drawing better TV ratings than ever before, or for wrestling drawing more fans, because neither is the case. I've actually become a bigger WWF fan than a WCW fan, all because of Ric Flair. The angle on Superstars was probably the best WWF angle since Roddy Piper hit Lou Albano over the head with Cyndi Lauper's gold record at Madison Square Garden. On the other end of the spectrum, the New York Daily News ran a photo of Lawrence Taylor and Paul E. dangerously together. The most shocking thing about it is the caption under the photo was correct and actually called Paul E., a WCW wrestling personality. Ifran Kermika. Brooklyn, New York. The Navajo Indian people love wrestling. They don't get a lot of entertainment on reservations, and the Indian people don't have any entertainment or sports figures to relate to. They know I'm a real Indian and I get over with them. Last spring in your newsletter you said that Steve Gator Wolf was going to get a tryout with the WWF. Let me make myself perfectly clear. I don't try out for no one. I've been there before, 85 to 87. The last time I was there, they wanted Jay Strongbow to tag with me and then shoot an angle with me turning heel on Jay. But Jay didn't want to, or maybe it was that he didn't want a real Indian to make more money than he ever did or to ever get it than he could have. So it left me out in the cold. But now I'm running shows in Arizona where there is no commission and lots of Indian reservations. Sometimes we sell out high school gyms. Our biggest crowd was 1,500 in a town called Safford. Many little towns have done gates of $3,000 to $5,500. Also, we've made some arrangements with Lions clubs here in Arizona to sponsor us in their local towns at their armories and high schools. It looks like we'll be running some towns on a monthly basis. Steve Gatorwolf. Mesa, Arizona. Steroids. Guess what? A proliferation of injuries where muscle detaches itself from tendons and bones, presumably because the tendon is carrying a far greater bulk of muscle than nature intended or allows for, is an indication of. Clue: I only did it once to recuperate a specific injury. Those injuries have decreased once when NFL started to crack down on steroid abuse. Michael Carlson. Vice President of European Operations. Major League Baseball. Observer. Your comments in the Sep 30 issue with regard to the Ron Simmons and Virgil skits border on being racist. The Butler Street YMCA is not located in Dunwoody, but in downtown Atlanta. If they wanted white yuppie kids, they would not find them in downtown Atlanta. Jim Russell. Orlando, Florida. DM, I was not making any kind of a value judgment as to the quality of either the Ron Simmons or Virgil skit, which were interesting because of their similarity in nature and proximity in time frame, with a marked difference as to the kids in the skits, all black in one, all white in the other. I'm hardly saying one was better than the other, only that it shows differences in the philosophy of both promotions. Bull Nakano. I'm glad to see you pointed out the great abilities of Bull Nakano in the October 7th issue. I'd argue that she's the best worker in the business today and the heir apparent to Bruiser Brody. Her monstrous ring persona, every bit as good as her predecessor Dumb Matsumoto, combined with outstanding technical skill, puts her on a par with Brody. There are others, like Akira Hokuto and Jushin Liger, who are her superiors as technical wrestlers, but she's got chutzpah. It's only a pity that now that she's reached her peak, she'll be forced into retirement in another year or so. I just hope she winds up with JWP to continue her career like Devil Masami and Itsuki Yamazaki. Frank Strom. Revere, Massachusetts. Hogan. Why do you pick on Hulk Hogan so much? Don't you know that children in hospitals and kids dying love him? He can't possibly meet with them all because he's only one person. But at least he tries, which is more than most big stars do. I've been following him since 1986 and he's a real human being, not the cartoon character that Vince McMahon pushes. He really does care. That doesn't mean he doesn't have his bad days. He's only human. Bruno Sammartino should be the last person to say anything bad about him. Hogan brought more money into the WWF than Bruno ever did. Hulk brought more recognition to the WWF and made wrestling shows a place children could go to see their heroes. Thanks to people like you and Bruno Sammartino and all the other negative people, Vince has ordered Hulk to lose the belt at Survivor Series so Sid Justice can get it in Texas. Vince McMahon pushed the ultimate steroid